Hello guys, I'm Yadagiri and welcome to my channel HVI Tutorials. In this video, I'll show you how to integrate the Excel files with the data provider in TestNG. So these are the points we are going to discuss inside this video guys. So before discussing any of these points, first let's understand the topic itself. So what exactly this topic is? Integration of Excel with data provider. What do you understand by this topic name? So basically till now we have seen how to create the data provider and how to feed the data statically in the data provider, right? So don't get confused. First let me quickly show you in the code. So these are the classes that I have actually used in my previous videos, right? So this is the class where I have created one test method and one data provider. So inside this data provider, I'm feeding the data statically, right? So I'm adding the data statically inside this data provider, and this data provider will be used inside the test method. So it will automatically identify how many sets of data is present inside this data provider, and it will execute based on that, right? So this part is dynamic, but this is static, right? So we are feeding the data statically inside this data provider, which is not a good practice. Why? Because if you want to modify the data tomorrow, if you want to add a new set of data or if you want to remove the existing set of data, you need to come to the code level and you need to make the changes, right? You need to come to the class files, the Java class files, and you need to come and you need to comment you need to remove if you want to remove, or you need to add if you want to add, right? So you are basically making the changes to the Java files or class files here, which is not a good practice in the real-time applications, correct? So your data provider should be able to fetch the data dynamically from some source, and the data should be fed to the test method so that our test method will execute all those sets of data. So that is the main solo purpose of the data provider, right? But if you are using the data provider data statically here, we are not actually achieving the 100% data provider concept. So we are losing something, right? So how do we implement that then? So in real-time applications, we never use this kind of concept, guys. We never use the static data. We always store our data in some source. So the source can be XML, the source can be JSON file, or it can be Excel file, or it can be a database also. So you are going to store the data inside some set of source, and we are going to read the data from that source, and we will integrate that data with the data provider dynamically. And then our data provider will be mentioned inside the test method. It will take care of the data completely. So it knows how many sets of data is there and how many sets of data, how to read everything it knows, right? So all we need to do is we need to add the data dynamically, not statically. So if you are adding the data statically like this, it is a bad practice. So we need to know how to add the data dynamically inside the data providers, right? So for that, we are going to use the Excel files in this video, guys. So let's get started. So that is the main concept, guys. Okay. So we want to keep the data inside some source. So it can be a JSON or XML or Excel or database. But in this video, I'm choosing the Excel file as the data source. And I want to read the data from the Excel file and I want to feed it to the data provider dynamically. Fine. So that is the concept. Now you understood the concept, right? So let's see the points that we are going to discuss inside this video. So first we will see what are the libraries available for reading the data from Excel file. So if you want to read the data from Excel file, you should know what are the libraries available in the market and what are the famous libraries that you should know, right? And then how to download and install the Apache POI Java library. So we are going to use the Apache POI Java library inside this video, guys. And then how to read the data from the Excel file dynamically. Dynamically means we are not going to specify the row number and column number anywhere. So everything should be dynamic. Tomorrow if I add another row also, I should not touch the code itself. So everything should be dynamic. Okay, so that is my point here. And then how to create the data provider by reading the data from Excel file. So here we are getting to know how to read the data from Excel files dynamically, right? So we read the data and we need to feed this data to the data provider. So that integration we are going to learn here. And then how to maintain the data provider data in a separate class. So that also we are going to learn. Okay. So these are the 5 points we are going to discuss inside this video, guys. So if you are watching this video for the first time, or if you are coming to this video directly, then I will suggest you to watch the previous videos on the data provider, guys. So it will help you in understanding the data provider, what exactly it is, what are the parameters available, everything. So if you are coming to this video directly, please watch those videos and come back to this video. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So first thing is, what are the libraries available for reading the data from Excel file? to know this point, first let's understand what exactly a Excel file is. Okay, so Excel file is a spreadsheet file which has rows and columns. So basically it's a tabular format of data, guys. So if you consider any text file, we are going to store the data in the form of lines, right? So in the text file, you are going to store the entire text in the lines format only, right? So in one line, you will enter some text, and in another line, you will enter some text, like that. But here in Excel files, we have the tabular format, the table format of data. You have number of rows and you have number of columns. Fine. So this is called as Excel. Excel is nothing but the spreadsheet, guys. Okay. So this is the Excel file. And then what are the extensions that we can use actually for creating the Excel file? So every file has the extension, right? So if you take the text file extension is txt. So similarly, what are the extensions for Excel file? So there are two extensions, guys. The first one is XLS and the second one is XLSX. So this XLS is the older version of extension and this XLSX is the newer version of Excel files. So that means if you create any file with the extension XLS, that is old version of Excel file. And if you create any Excel file with the XLSX extension, then that is called as newer version of Excel file. So now we know what is the Excel file and what are the extensions available for Excel file also, right? So now we will see what are the libraries available. So there are two famous libraries available in the Java for reading or writing the data from the Excel files, guys. Okay. So what are those? The first one is Apache POI. Apache POI that we already mentioned here, right? And then JXL is another library. So for reading or writing the data from the Excel files, these are the two libraries that are most widely used in the Java market. So there are so many other third-party libraries also, okay? But they are not so famous. So if you find any of those things also useful, please go ahead and use them. So there is no restriction like we need to use only Apache POI or we need to use only JXL like that. So you can use any of the library that you like actually, okay? Just look at the features and if you feel it is very good, then please go ahead and use it. So there is no restriction in the TestNG, guys, okay? Remember that. So here we have two libraries. So why we are actually going with the Apache POI then? The reason is Apache POI supports both the versions of Excel files, the older version and the newer version of Excel files. But whereas JXL file will support only the older version of Excel files, guys, okay? The JXL library supports only the older version of Excel files. It is not going to support the newer version of Excel files. Fine. But if your requirement is to use only the older version of Excel file, then please go ahead with the JXL file. Why? Because the JXL is faster than Apache POI in performance wise. Apache POI is very good. It's a user friendly and very easy to use. But it is a little bit slower compared to JXL in the performance wise. But as we know, we don't know which extension we are going to use in our real-time projects. We may use XLS file, we may use XLSX file also. So that's why we need to choose the library which is supporting both of these versions. So that tomorrow there will not be any new problem. Okay. So that's why I'm going to show you this Apache POI. I don't know which library, which Excel file you are going to use in your project, right? You might use XLS or you might use XLSX. So that is why I'm going to pick the Apache POI library here. Fine. So the next point is downloading and installation of Apache POI Java library. So let's watch this one first. So for this second point and third point, if you want to know how to download and install the Apache POI and how to read the data from Excel file, you don't need to come to this video only for that purpose. So you can watch one of the other playlist. So if you just search HVI tutorials and just go into that one. So go to the playlist section and you will find one playlist called Apache POI. So here I have explained everything beautifully, guys. Okay. So I have mentioned what is Apache POI and what it actually can do and how to download and install the Apache POI in normal Java projects as well as Maven projects, and then how to create the Excel files and how to enter the data into the Excel files, and then how to read the data from the Excel files. So everything I have covered inside this playlist, guys. So I will suggest you to please watch this playlist, because here I'm going to only show you how to download and install and then how to read. I'm not going to cover how to write. And also I'm going to show you downloading and installation part inside the Maven project only. I'm not going to show the normal project. So if you are using the normal project, please watch this first video so that you will get to know how to install the Apache POI inside the normal projects as well. here I have Maven project. So first let me open the pom.xml file. So as we all know, if you want to download or install any library inside your project, if it is a Maven project, then you need to add the dependency inside the pom.xml file, right? So here in Chrome, I have already opened the Maven repository. The link is mvnrepository.com, and here search for Apache POI. So give some space and search, guys. Okay, Apache POI. So here we are getting so many things, right? So there are so many things that are actually matching with Apache POI word. So which one we need to pick? So there are two libraries that we need to actually use, guys. So these are the two libraries that we actually need to download. So first thing is Apache POI. So you need to check this one, POI. So first we need to download this one. So I'm going with the latest version, guys. So let's just copy this and go to the pom.xml file and we'll paste it here. And then if you can just back, and we need the OOXML also, right? POI OOXML. So click on this one and go to this 5.1.0. So in your case, it might be different, guys. Okay, today I'm recording this video and the latest version is 5.1.0. So tomorrow, if there is a new version, please use that one. So I'm just copying this one and I'll paste it here. I don't need these comment lines. I'll delete this and let me just align it. Control A and Control I. And let's just save this one. So it will download the libraries into my project, guys. So you can see it is building the project and it will download the libraries also into my project, and it will add those libraries to the build path also. In normal Java projects, we need to add it to the build path, but in the Maven project, it will automatically add it to the build path. So the libraries are downloaded. So let's check in the build path. So if you see Maven dependencies, search for Apache POI. So you can see POI OOXML, POI OOXML, and XML beans. So these all are coming from the Apache POI only. You can see POI 5.1.0. So these all are coming from the Apache POI only, guys. So we are done with the downloading and installation part, right? So the next thing is how to read the data from Excel file dynamically. So this we will see now. So first let's understand the Excel workbook, guys. So first let's understand the Excel workbook. Then we can easily understand how to read the data from the Excel files. So whenever you are using any Excel file, so we are calling the term, we are calling that software as an Excel file, right? But what actually it is? So when you click on file menu, so what it is actually showing, recent workbooks, right? So basically Excel is a workbook, guys. So here you need to mention that. So Excel is a workbook. You need to remember that one. Excel file, we are saying Excel file, but it is actually Excel workbook. And inside the workbooks, what we have the number of sheets, right? So this is one sheet and I can have multiple sheets like this. And in each sheet, I can have different data, correct? One workbook can contain multiple sheets. So let's just note this one also, sheet. So first workbook is there, and inside the workbook, we have the sheet, and inside the sheet, what is there? Data. So let's just split this one. I know the data is there inside the sheet, but let's just understand in a meaningful manner. So inside the data, so these are the rows and these are the columns, right? So we have number of rows, and in each row we have number of columns or cells, right? So when you take only one row, you can say this is one cell, this is one cell, this is one cell, correct? So that means inside the sheet we have row, and inside the row we have cell. So this is the structure, right? So now we understood Excel workbook. Whenever you talk about the Excel file, it's basically Excel workbook, and inside the Excel workbook you have multiple sheets, and in each sheet you have multiple rows, and in each row you have multiple cells. Fine. So if you understand this one, guys, then everything is easy. So what I will do is I'll just create one class here inside this DP test. I'll name this class as Excel data supplier. Just a meaningful name. That's it, guys. Okay. Excel data supplier, and I need one main method, and I click on finish. So I don't need any of these files, right? So I'll just close all those things and I'll minimize this. So first we need to learn how to read the data from Excel file, and we will read the data from Excel file and we will print it in the console, and then we will see how to integrate it with the data provider, guys. What we need to do, if you want to handle any files in the Java, first we need to create the file instance in Java, right? File, I'll say Excel file, new file, right? So inside this we need to provide the path of the Excel file. So where do I create the Excel file? So let me add one resources folder here, or I already have one resources, right? So inside this I will add the Excel file. Okay, so let's just jump into this folder first. So I'm opening this one inside the file explorer. Here I will create the Excel file, guys. Okay, so this is the Excel file. So I'll just make these cells as large so that you can see them clearly. So first let me save this one. So here I want to actually save the Excel file. So what I'll do, I'll just mention this one as test Excel workbook. So inside this, if you want to save your Excel workbook as the older version of Excel workbook, then you need to choose this one, Excel 97 2003 workbook. If you want to save it as a newer version of Excel workbook, then choose the Excel workbook only. Okay, so this extension is XLSX and this extension is XLS. Fine. So I'm going to create the newer version of Excel workbook only, and I click on save. So I haven't added any data. So first let's add some data here. So I'll just read the username and password from this one, guys. Username, and then the second one is password. So let me just use some dummy usernames and passwords. Admin123. So this is test123, prod123. That's it. Okay, so 3 sets of data I have mentioned. The first one is always header row, right? So without header row, how do you understand what data it is actually? So for every table you need the header, right? So in the similar way, for every Excel file you need the header also, so that based on this header column only you will understand what data is present inside this column. Correct? So I'll just show some difference here. So you can apply any formatting, guys, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm just showing you the difference, the header column difference basically. And I'll just mention this one as some blue color. So it is a header and these are the normal rows. Fine. So I have actually saved it, and just come to this normal Eclipse. Okay, so we need to pass the path here, right? So we are referring to the current project. You can refer to the current project, or you can also refer to the entire path. So anything is fine, guys. Okay, so if you want to refer to the current file, current project and current file. So first let me refresh this. So you can see the test XLSX is created here. So right click on that and go to properties, and you can get the path from here, guys. You can provide this path, or you can provide the entire path also. Fine. So when you are writing the relative path, you don't need to mention this entire path also. Copy this. Let's paste it here. And first let's see whether this file is existing or not. Fine. File.exist. So there is a method called exist. So here the name is Excel file, not file, exist. Okay, so let me just run this. Okay, so this is not able to find. Okay, so let me just remove these things. Dot represents the current repository. Inside the current repository, we need to go to this location only, right? So let's try now. It says true. That means the file is existed. So it is able to identify the file now. Correct? So let's minimize this. The file is there and we want to read the data from this file. So how to do that one? So if you want to read any data from any file, first you need to create the streams, right? You need to create the input stream. Then only you can read the data from that file, right? So here we have created only the file instance, but we haven't read the data, right? The raw data we haven't read. So first we need to read the raw data. Then we need to convert that raw data into Excel workbook format. So to read the raw data, we need to use the file input streams, guys. So any stream you can actually use, not just the file input stream, any stream you can use. New file input stream. So when you are creating the object for the file input stream, all you need to do is pass the Excel file, okay, the file instance. So this is the Excel file, so I'm passing it here, and just I'll put semicolon. So when you are using this file input stream, it will try to throw the checked exception. So either you can use the surround with try catch, or you can use throws declaration also. For now, I'll just use the throws declaration. So now the raw data is present inside the FIS, right? So we need to convert this raw data into Excel workbook format. So here we have two types of extensions. One is XLS and the other one is XLSX. So when the extension is XLS, you need to use the word called H. And if it is XLSX, you need to use the word called X, okay, the letter. So where we are actually using that, let me show you. So XSSF workbook. So if it is an older version of Excel, then you need to use HSSF workbook. See, so everything is like that only, guys. HSSF or XSSF. For older versions, we need to use H, and for newer versions, we need to use X. Okay. So here I'm using the newer version only. You can see XLSX is the extension. So I'll use XSSF workbook. And I'll just mention workbook equal. So here I'm not going to create a new workbook, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read this entire raw data into the workbook format. I want to convert it into workbook format, right? So first let's create the workbook instance here. While creating the workbook instance, pass the file input stream, that is raw data, okay? New workbook. So while you are creating the XSSF workbook, you can see there is something called XSSF workbook of input stream. So you can use this one, guys, okay? So you can pass the file input stream to this one and just put a semicolon. That's it. So now your workbook is ready. First, what is the workbook? So workbook is ready. Then what we need to create? Sheet. So already there is some sheet inside the Excel file. So you can see there are 3 sheets, and in the first sheet I have the data. So how do I add this sheet? Same XSSF sheet, and you can see XSSF sheet, and then I'll just mention this one as sheet. So I'm not going to create a new sheet here. What I need to do is I need to get the sheet from this workbook. So the workbook is already created here. So I need to get the sheet from the workbook. So for that, there are 2 methods, guys, okay? So when you type get sheet, there are 2 methods. One is get sheet of string name, and the other one is get sheet at int index. So you can get the sheet by using its name. So here the sheet name is sheet 1, or you can get the workbook by the index also. So this is first index, this is second, this is third, like that. So you can go by the index also. So here I'll just mention the workbook name only. Okay, I'll just copy this because the workbook name is always good, right? So tomorrow, even if I add another workbook, if I change the order also, it won't fail. So I'll say get sheet of workbook name. Sorry, sheet name. Okay, not the workbook name, guys. Sheet name. So here the sheet is also prepared. First I'm creating the file instance, and then I'm creating the raw data. Okay, I'm reading the raw data from this file instance, and then I'm converting this raw data into Excel workbook format. And from this workbook, I'm getting the sheet, and from this sheet, I need to get the rows, right? So now the workbook is ready and the sheet is also ready. So to get the rows, first let's understand how many rows are present inside this one. Okay, so how many rows are present inside this Excel file? First let's understand that one. So to get to know how many rows are there, there is one method, guys. Sheet dot get physical number of rows. So it will return you how many number of rows are present inside the workbook. So it will return you how many number of rows are present physically inside the workbook. So this is the one, sorry, inside the sheet basically, workbook or sheet, anything is fine. So it will return the integer. So I'll just print that in the console. And whenever you are working with any Excel workbooks or any file input streams, at the end of your operations, always make sure you are closing the connections. Otherwise, the memory leakage will happen, guys. Okay. So whenever you are using these things, always make sure you are closing the connections. So first let's close the connection. First I'll close the connection of workbook, workbook.close, and then I will close the connection of file input stream. So now let's run this. So if you are getting any error messages like this, don't bother guys, okay, because I don't have any log4j2 installed in my system. That is why it is showing the error message here. Don't worry about those things guys, okay. So the number of rows present inside this workbook are 4. So let's check. This is one row, this is one, this is one, this is one. So there are totally 4 number of rows present inside this one. But we are getting the header row also, right? Why we are getting the header row also as a normal row? So we are just asking how many number of rows are present inside this workbook. So we are getting all the number of rows. But instead of that, there is another method guys, okay? There is another method by which you can exclude the header row and get only the number of rows present inside that one, excluding the header row. So what is that? Get last row, okay? Get last row number. So this is also same only guys, okay? This is also same only actually. So let's just print this. So you can see when you say number of rows, it is returning 4. But when you say get last number of row, last row number, then it is returning only 3, right? Why it is returning 3? Because your index starts from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. Your last row number will be always 3 only. That's why it is returning 3, nothing else, okay? So what you can do, you can iterate 4 or you can iterate 3. So how do you want to iterate? Basically, we never read the data from the header, right? We always want to read the data from the normal rows only without header. So we want to iterate 3 rows only then. We don't want to iterate the 4th row, the first row. So we want to only iterate 3 rows, okay? So let's see how we can iterate it. So I'll just implement the for loop here. So I'll use this. So we can store this number of rows inside one variable. So I'll just remove this sysout statements and I'll store inside some row, some variable. Number of rows equal this thing, right? So number of rows is there and I'll just use that. So by this way, I can read each and every row. But if I am passing the 0 as the index, then I will be able to read the first row also. But I don't want to read the first row because it is a header row, right? So I'll just mention this one as 1. So now my iteration will only happen for 3 things, right? 1, 2 and 3. Only for 3 rows my iteration will happen. My loop will iterate. So I'm just removing this thing. So this is not required. So now in each row, I want to know how many number of columns are present. So in each row, you can have different number of sets, right? So for example, in the first row, you can have 2 columns and in the second row, you can have 4 columns, okay? But always your header row will tell you how many number of columns are present, correct? So without providing the header, you're not going to provide the value also, obviously, right? So that's why always make sure you are getting the number of columns by using the header row only. Int number of columns equal sheet dot. So inside the sheet, what we have the row. So which row we want to actually get? We want to get the header row because inside the header only we are going to count the columns. So get row. So there is a method called get row and we need to pass the index to that method. Get row. So what is the index for header row? The index will always be 0. And then there is a method called get last cell number. So it will give you how many number of columns are present inside the first row. So this will give you number of columns, guys. Okay. So now we will just iterate it and we will print it. So this will iterate the number of rows and I want another for loop which can iterate number of columns also. So I'll use for and here I'll just write number of columns, correct? Number of columns. So I want to print those values here, guys. So how do I print that? Sysout. So before that, first let's see how to access the data. So we know how to access the row, right? So just write sheet dot get row and we need to pass the index. So here, which is the row index? The first one is the row index and the second one is the column things, right? So we need to pass I value here. I dot get cell. Okay, so there is a method called get cell. Inside the row you have multiple cells. So that is what I have told you, right? So inside the row you have cell. So you need to use the method called get cell. And we need to pass the index. So which index we are going to pass? This column index only. That is J. So I mean we are getting the cell here, but we are not getting the text inside the cell. So to get the text inside the cell, we need to use get string cell value. So there are so many methods, guys. Get string cell value, get boolean cell value. So based on your data type, okay, so every cell can be a different thing, right? If you even right click on this and if you go to format cells, so these all are the categories, right? You can read the number, you can read the currency, you can read the accounting, date, time, percentage and fraction and scientific and text and everything. So for reading each and every of these things, we have a separate method, guys. So now I know this is a text thing. So I'm going to read the text format of data only. So I'll use get string cell value. I'm going to use get string cell value method. And I need to just print this one inside the console, right? Sys out. And I'll print it in the console. So once the first row is completed, I'll just add another row. Okay, I mean just a line break. That's it. Okay. So let me run this. So here you can see admin 123, test 123, prod 123. So the entire data we have actually printed in the console, right? So it's very easy, guys. See, hardly how many lines of code is there? Like 15 lines of code, just 14 lines of code only, right? So it's very easy. And we have also one more empty line. So it's only 13 lines of code, which is very easy, right? So reading the data from Excel file using Apache POI library is very easy. Once you understand this flow, workbook, sheet, then row, then cell, it is very easy. So this is how we are going to read the data from the Excel file, guys. Fine. So now here we are using the get string cell value, but we don't know every time whether the string value will be there or any other format of the data will be there, right? So for that you can use one more class here, that is data formatter. Data formatter. So you can see there is something called data formatter. So first let's create the instance for this data formatter. New data formatter, and then df dot format cell value. So which cell value you want to actually format, so that you need to specify, guys. Okay, so if you format the cell value, you can see it is always going to return you the string value only. So what is the cell? So until here this is a cell, guys. So this is the cell. So I'll just comment this line, and here it is returning the normal string value. So I'll just put the sysout statement here. So instead of identifying each and every data separately, so you can just use the data formatter. So it will convert any type of data into the normal string type of data, guys. Okay, that means the text type of data. So now let's execute this. You can see the data is printed in the console. So let's add some data here with some normal numbers. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So I'm adding only 1, 2, 3, and I'll just convert this into normal number format. And let's see whether it is working correctly or not. So I'm just converting it to number format, and I'll just run this. You can see 123 is also printed in the console, right? So because we have 123.00, it is printing 123.00 here. If you want to convert into int, then you can just use the wrapper classes, double dot value of, you can convert this to integer, right? So this is how we are going to read the data from the Excel file, guys. Okay. So now the data reading is completed. So we have the data, right? So all we need to do is integrate this data with the data provider. And before that, we need to do one more thing, guys. So here the data is actually prepared in the format of tabular format, right? So basically it's a two-dimensional array because we have two dimensions, rows and columns. So it's a two-dimensional array. So if you want to store this entire data in some array, you need to create the two-dimensional array only, right? Why I'm talking about the arrays here? That is because we need to supply the data to the data provider. So inside the data provider, you need to use any one kind of array, right? So any one kind of iterator or array basically. So if you look at any of these methods, so you see, so either you can use a set of objects, object array, or anything. So here I want to create the two-dimensional array because I'm using the Excel file. The Excel file is actually a two-dimensional data. It's not a single dimensional data. Okay. So let's first create one two-dimensional array here. So how do you create the two-dimensional array? So I'll just mention this one as a string array. You can mention this one as an object array also. There's nothing wrong in that. String array. Okay, it's a two-dimensional array, and I'll specify it as a data equal new string array, right? So while creation of the array itself, we need to specify the size. Am I correct? So while creation of the array itself, we need to specify the size, how many number of rows you want and how many number of columns you want in each row, right? So rows and columns count you need to specify in the array also. So what is the row count? So this is the row count. But out of this, you want to actually use only number of rows, okay, excluding the header row. That means -1. Fine. Number of rows -1, and then number of columns. Number of columns is nothing but number of cells in each row. So this is the array that I'm actually creating, guys, dynamically. So everything you see, everything here is dynamic only. So here, instead of printing it in the console, I want to store it in the data variable. Data of I and data of j only. Correct? I is nothing but the row and j is nothing but the column. So I'm storing the data into the array, guys. That's it. Don't get confused here much. So whatever the data that I'm actually getting here, I'm reading the entire data into this array. I'm storing it into array. So now at the end, I can just iterate the array and I can print the values. Or just to show you, for the time being, I'll use this one, arrays.toString, and I'll pass the data. So it will just print the array data itself. If I directly try to print the data array, it will print the object. It will not print the data. So that's why I'm using this one. And I need to specify this inside the sysout statement. Okay, so there is some exception. So what it says, index 3 out of bounds for length 3. So why we are getting that exception? So I'll tell you guys. So we are reading the data here by using 1, right? So instead of that, what you can do, you can just mention number of rows -1 here, and here you can specify it as 0. So when you specify it as 0, then again the first row will be coming, right? The header row. So that's why what you can also do is -1. Okay, sorry, +1. So you can just specify this get row as +1. So now let's just iterate. So even now we are getting the objects of object. So I'll do one thing. I'll just use for each loop here. And from this I'm getting 1 array, and inside this I'll write this statement so that I'll get the entire data. Okay, so this data array I'll pass it here just to show you guys. Okay, so I'm not going to use this for each anywhere, but I want to just show you how it is actually created internally. Now you see, admin 1 2 3, test 1 2 3, prod 1 2 3. So the entire data is printed here. So we are getting the empty lines because of this line. So let's just remove this. So the data array is also prepared, guys. The two-dimensional array is also prepared. All we need to do is integrate the data array. Okay, integrate this two-dimensional array with the data provider. That's it. It's very easy job, guys. Okay, so let's run this and see one more time for the final time. You see, the data is properly printed in the console. Okay, so whatever the data that we are actually storing here, the same data that we are actually getting inside the console also. So the reading part is perfect, and we have stored the data also in the two-dimensional array, which is very good thing. And now we need to create the array, data provider. Okay, so how do you create the data provider? Simple. You can just create one method. Okay, you can create one method and specify the data provider annotation on top of that method. Or I can just convert this main method into that method itself. Okay, so I'll say public void get data. Okay, get data is my method name, and I'll specify the data provider. And whenever you are using the data provider, right, you need to return the two-dimensional array, correct? So I'm not going to print anything here, so I'll just comment this. And you need to throw the exception, or you can use the try catch blocks also. If you don't want to throw the exception, you can use the try catch block also. And here we need to actually return two-dimensional array, right? So this data we want to return from this data provider. Fine. So at the end of the method, I'll just write return data. And here I need to change this one to two-dimensional string array. So here, guys, we have completed the third point, and we are just jumping into the fourth point. That is the integration of the data with the data provider. We have read the data from the Excel file dynamically, and now we are integrating it with the data provider. So the data provider is ready, guys. Okay. So in my previous video, we have learned how to specify the data provider in a separate class also, right? So that concept we have already learned. So in this class, I have provided the data provider, and we will just use this class itself. Okay. So let's just create this basic test class one more time, and I'll name this one as basic test 5. And let's open this. I'll remove this data provider from here. I don't want that, because my data provider is coming from which class? Excel data supplier class. So I need to specify that here, comma, data provider class Excel data supplier dot class. Okay. And what is my data provider name also? I haven't provided any data provider name here. So the data provider name will be normally your data provider method name itself. Get data. So I'm just mentioning here. Okay. Or you can specify this login data only as a name to the data provider. Let's use this. So anything is fine, guys. So login data I'm using here, and in each row I'm getting two columns, username and password. So what exactly I'm doing? I'm trying to run this test with 3 sets of data. Okay, with 3 sets of data I'm trying to run this test. So let's see what is the data that we will actually, what is the result that we will get. So let me just quickly go here and let's see the passwords. Okay, so admin123. So we have one correct set of password and 2 wrong sets of passwords. Okay, so let's just execute this. I'll right click on this, run as TestNG test. It will open the Chrome browser and it will try to log into the Orange HRM website. Okay, and the username and password are coming from the Excel file now. We haven't created any static data provider here. We have created the data provider and we are feeding the data from the Excel file, guys. Not statically. We are feeding the data dynamically from the Excel file. So my system is a little bit slow, so that's why it is taking so much time to open the Chrome browser. So Orange HRM website is opened, and first it entered admin123, and you can see the login is successful. And it will close that. And the next one is wrong sets of password, right? I mean, wrong username and wrong password. So it will not even log in also. Okay. So it will simply fail the test case. But the browser will not be closed because we haven't added that code for the failed test cases, guys. Okay. You see, the second test is failed and the third test is running. Prod 1 to 3, and this is also invalid. So it is also failed. But the browser is not closed because we haven't handled that code. Okay. So if you see, the total test run are 3. Okay. And if you look at the result also, pass 1, 2 failures, which is an expected thing, right? Because we have passed the wrong credentials, guys. That's why it is failed. You see, admin 1 to 3 is passed, and test 1 to 3 is failed, and then prod 1 to 3 is also failed. So if you want to reduce or if you want to increase the number of test cases tomorrow, how easy it is. I'm not going to touch the code, guys. Okay, I'm not going to touch any of this code. So first let's close these browsers. Close and then close. So I'm not going to touch any of this code. Okay, all I'll do is I'll just simply delete this line. So I have only 2 test cases now. I mean 2 sets of data now, right? So let's execute this. So the first set of data is actually executing. So it is admin 1 to 3. You can see admin 1 to 3, and the login will be successful, and it will close the browser also. Because the login is successful, the assertion is passed. So that's why driver.pit is executing. So if the login is failed, then it will not execute the driver.pit command here, because that is how I have designed this test script. So this one is failed. So it will not close the browser, don't worry. So we'll just minimize it and let's go to the console. You can see total test run are 2 and pass is 1 and failure is 1. And here also it clearly says admin 1 to 3 is passed and test 1 to 3 is failed. So we haven't actually modified anything inside the code, right? We haven't removed any data from the data provider, or we haven't modified any code here. All we did is just modify or add or remove the data inside the Excel file, and your code will automatically picks up how many sets of data is present, and in each set of data how many columns are there. Everything it will get, guys. Okay, so tomorrow if you add 100 sets of data also here, you don't need to touch your code base. Your code base will still same and it will execute for all the 100 test cases. Okay, so that is the beauty of integrating any data source with the data provider. So it will read the data dynamically. It will read the data dynamically so that you don't need to modify the data provider statically every time. Okay, so that is the beautiful concept here. So that is the third and fourth point, guys. How to read the data and how to read the data and integrate it with the data provider. And then how to maintain the data provider in a separate class. So we already know how to do that one, right? So we have done that one in my previous video. So even in this video also, we have separated the data provider in another class and we are reading the data from this class only, right? So we have specified data provider class equal this one. Fine. So that is for this video, guys. So here we have learned how to read the data from the Excel file and how to integrate it with the data provider, and we have also learned what are the libraries available and how to download and install Apache POI libraries. Everything we have learned about the Excel files, right? So if you have any doubts, please let me know in the comment section below. If you are facing any issues while reading the data from the Excel files, please mention that also in the comment section below, guys. So this is a very, very important topic because we are going to use this topic only inside the real-time projects. Okay, we are not going to specify the data provider data statically in any real-time project. Everywhere we are going to use some data source, either it can be Excel or database or anything. So now we have read the data from the Excel file and we have created this two-dimensional array. If you are reading the data from any database or anything, you can just read the data and put it into the this two-dimensional array, and then the other concept is same. you need to create one data provider and return this data, this 2-dimensional array from this data provider. That's it. This concept is same, guys. Okay, integration of data provider with this data concept is same, but how do you read this data from the data source is different. For Excel, this is the thing. For database, it can be a different thing. For XML, it can be a different thing. For JSON, it can be a different thing. So all you need to do is learn that stuff. That's it. You are very good to go with every kind of real-time project. So that is for this video, guys. Already this video is very lengthy. Because I have explained each and every point clearly, this video became very lengthy. I know, don't scold me. So if you like the video, please hit the like button and also share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.